Hello, Steve Mills here, and welcome to another podcast. It's great to be back sharing with you some tried, tested, and proven ways in which you could grow your business. The words, if only. We've all said them, haven't we? If only I'd done this, and if only I'd done that. My background is as an international sportsman. I used to play table tennis at international level. I was a full-time professional player for over 10 years in my sort of late teens and early 20s. And I played both in major tournaments and beat some of the best players in the world. Played in Germany and obviously in the UK where I'm from. And, I look back now and whilst, I achieved some great things and won many tournaments and matches and, I was a very, very passionate competitor, I think is probably the easiest way I could put it. I was very, very determined. I look back now and I think to myself, if only I'd learned what I know now back then, I remember years ago saying that when I was 16, I couldn't believe how little my father knew. And by the time I was 20, I couldn't believe how much he'd learnt in 4 years. And clearly he hadn't learnt that. It's just I'd learnt that actually he knew what he was talking about. Whereas when I was 16, I probably didn't think he knew as much as I thought he knew when I was 20, if that makes sense. But my point being for the podcast, if only I'd learned earlier, if I'd learned all about everything that, all the skills, how to train better, just had a better understanding of, I suppose, personal development and fitness and technique and, just had a better knowledge, I'm sure I would have become a far better, I don't just mean a little bit better, I mean a far better table tennis player. I now look at, my life. I've now been 25 years helping and advising small businesses. And, to be honest, I still say the same. One thing, I know that if I'd learned earlier and not made some of the mistakes that I've made over the years, in business, I'll be absolutely honest with you, we've had our ups and downs and our great times and let's say our not so great times. I've made probably more marketing mistakes than anybody listening to this podcast today. But the one thing I have done is, whilst I didn't learn earlier, I've certainly learned from my mistakes. And I think, we all learn from our mistakes. That's really how we learn, isn't it? It's a process of making mistakes. But one of the keys to that is making sure that you don't make big mistakes, which is, where my theory all about testing different marketing campaigns to see if they work in a small conservative way without betting the ranch becomes more important. If I asked you a question, if you imagine, right, and this, by the way, I want to give credit to the gentleman who first mentioned this to me. He's a gentleman by the name of Peter Thompson. I've learnt a lot from Peter over many, many years. Years ago, 20 odd years ago, I was listening to him on tape, on CDs after that, and then on podcasts like this one, and we've become good friends. I've been on many of Peter's workshops, and he's someone I highly respect. And one of the things that he taught me, I think it's about 4 years ago now, he said this. He said, let's imagine that you're transported 12 months into the future. And you're looking back on the last 12 months. And those 12 months have not been great. Maybe business has not improved. Perhaps it's even fallen back. And you've had a really tough time. Imagine that. You're 12 months down the line and things have not gone as well as you would like. So Peter says, answer the question, if only I'd. If only I'd. If only I'd what? If only I'd, and I'll just give you some examples here. If only I'd spent more time on marketing. If only I'd got my website sorted out. If only I'd become more effective at debt collection. If only I'd produced a business plan. If only I'd sought advice sooner. If only I'd learned earlier. If only I'd recognised that that particular product was never going to be successful. And so on and so forth. So it's a great way. Peter calls it future pacing, going into the future, looking back, and trying to get an understanding. It's like looking at it from a different angle. In the future, in a year's time, if only I'd done this and done that, I'd have been more successful. Well, at least you now know that. Let's go and do it. That's basically what this is all about. So, think about, if only you'd learned. Let's just take that. If only you'd learned. If it's a year's time, you trans forward. If only I'd learned. If only I'd learned what? What would that be in your case? If only I'd learned how to do a certain thing, a skill. If only I'd learned how to become more effective in selling. Whatever that is for you. I hope it makes a difference to your business. And, just go ahead, grab a piece of paper now and go and, play the if only I'd game. If only I'd done something, perhaps you could be more successful over the next 12 months and not look back thinking, I really should have done that. So that's all I've got to say for now. Perhaps you might want to look at if only I'd joined Steve Mills on his results program. Perhaps that's something you could look back on. And if you want to know more about that, go to stevemills.co. So thanks very much for listening and look forward to speaking soon. Bye.